The restaurant had the kind of soft golden lighting that usually made everything feel warm and welcoming, but for Emma, it only made the shadows feel heavier. She sat at a small round table pushed into the far corner, almost hidden from the rest of the diners. In front of her was a perfectly frosted pink cake, small enough for a child, yet decorated as if it were meant to be shared with friends. The words "Happy Birthday, Emma" curled across the top in careful loops of white icing. 8 candles, bright and waiting, stood proudly in a neat little row. They flickered slightly each time someone walked past, their flames bending as if searching for someone who would notice. Emma's wheelchair was parked close to the table, her small hands resting quietly in her lap. Her dress, a soft shade of lavender with tiny embroidered flowers, had been chosen carefully that morning. Her father's assistant had helped her braid her hair, weaving in a pale ribbon to match the dress. Everything about her appearance said this was supposed to be a special day. But here she was, sitting alone, her legs motionless, her posture slightly slumped as though even her back had grown tired of waiting. She glanced toward the restaurant's glass door again, her eyes quick and hopeful for half a second before that hope dimmed. The door swung open, letting in a cold gust of wind and a pair of laughing teenagers. Not who she was waiting for. Her gaze dropped to the cake again. The candles seemed to mock her now, each tiny flame dancing in the quiet. Almost impatient. Around her, the restaurant was alive, the sound of clinking cutlery, the low hum of conversations, a burst of laughter from a group of co-workers sharing a drink after work. To them, it was just another Thursday evening. To Emma, it was her birthday, a day she had imagined for weeks. She'd pictured balloons tied to her chair, friends gathered around singing, maybe even her father making time to be there. But her father, the CEO of a large company, had sent a brief text that morning. "Happy birthday, Princess. I'll make it up to you this weekend." She told herself it was fine. She was used to his work coming first. But even telling herself that didn't make the silence feel any less heavy. Every so often a waiter would glance her way, offering a polite smile before moving on. None of them stopped to ask if she needed anything. They'd probably assumed someone was on their way to join her. Emma reached for the cake knife once, then pulled her hand back. Cutting it alone felt wrong. Singing to herself felt even worse. Her throat tightened, and she blinked quickly to stop the tears from spilling. She didn't want anyone to see her cry. She hated pity almost as much as she hated the empty chair. Across from her. Somewhere inside her chest, a tiny voice whispered that maybe no one was coming. But she forced herself to believe otherwise. Someone would walk in. Someone would sit down. Someone would light the candles properly and sing for her. She just had to wait a little longer. And so, she sat there, small and quiet in her corner. A girl with a birthday cake and no one to share it with, yet, at the opposite end of the restaurant. Tucked near the window where the city's evening lights shimmered against the glass, Don sat with his 7-year-old daughter, Lila. Their table was scattered with remnants of dinner, half-eaten fries, a shared plate of spaghetti, and 2 tall glasses of chocolate milk. Layla, all energy and brightness, was mid-story about how she'd won a class spelling bee that morning. Her laughter bubbled between words, her hands moving in wide, dramatic gestures. Don smiled at her, but his eyes, almost without permission, kept wandering toward the quiet corner of the room. At first, it was just a glance, a vague curiosity about the small figure in the wheelchair. But the more he looked, the more details he noticed. The untouched cake, the soft lavender dress. The way the girl kept glancing toward the door, her expression flickering with hope, and then falling into stillness. Don recognized that look. He had seen it once before, in the mirror, on a night when Leila's mother had promised to show up for her birthday and never did. He felt a pang deep in his chest. He tried to pull his attention back to Leila's story, nodding at her excitement. But something inside him refused to ignore the girl in the corner. The restaurant was full of chatter and clinking plates, yet that small table seemed to exist in a bubble of silence. It wasn't just the absence of people around her, it was the absence of belonging. Asterisk Dan's gaze lingered long enough for Layla to notice. "Dad?" she asked, tilting her head. "Why are you looking over there?" Asterisk Dan hesitated. "Just wondering," he murmured. He glanced back again and saw the girl tracing a finger along the edge of her cake plate, almost like she was trying to distract herself from the fact that no one was coming. He felt his throat tighten. He remembered what it was like to watch your child's excitement fade because the person they were waiting for never showed. Asterisk. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew one thing. No kid should spend their birthday staring at a cake alone. Asterisk. Dan sat there for another minute, torn between politeness and impulse. Would it be strange to approach her? Would she feel uncomfortable? He looked at Lila, sweet, open-hearted Lila, and realized that maybe, just maybe, the two of them could change the course of that girl's night. Asterisk. He reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "Hey, Lil," he said softly. "How about we go make a new friend?" Asterisk. Lila's eyes sparkled instantly. "The girl with the cake?" Asterisk. Dan smiled. "Yeah, the girl with the cake." Asterisk. Together they stood, weaving between tables and chairs. Emma saw them approaching before they reached her. She stiffened slightly, her hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair. She wasn't used to strangers walking toward her like they belonged. "There," Asterisk. Don knelt down so his eyes were level with hers, his voice gentle but warm. "Hi, we couldn't help but notice it's your special day. Would you mind if we joined you?" Asterisk. For a moment, Emma just stared at him, unsure if she had heard right. Lila stepped forward, her grin wide and sincere. "I love cake," she said, brightly, "and birthdays and singing really loud." Asterisk. Emma blinked. No one had spoken to her like that all evening. Not the waiters, not the customers, not anyone. Her voice came out small but clear. "Okay." Asterisk. Dan smiled and pulled out a chair for Layla, then looked at the cake. "Well," he said, "I think these candles have been waiting long enough to be blown out." Asterisk. Emma's lips curled into the faintest smile. For the first time that night, the corner of the restaurant didn't feel so far away from the world. Asterisk. Don struck a match, shielding the tiny flame with his hand as he lit the first candle. The golden glow spread across the pink frosting, reflecting softly in Emma's eyes. Layla leaned in eagerly, humming the first notes of Happy Birthday before she could even stop herself. By the time Dan had lit all 8 candles, Layla's voice was in full swing, off-key, loud and utterly joyful. Asterisk. A couple at the next table looked over and smiled. Then, almost shyly, one of them joined in. A waiter passing by added his voice. Within seconds, the quiet corner of the restaurant that had felt like an island of loneliness became a tiny stage where strangers sang for a girl they'd never met. Asterisk. Emma's cheeks warmed, her fingers curling against her lap as she looked around, almost overwhelmed. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, turning her solitude into something bright, alive, and full. For the first time all night, she wasn't invisible. Asterisk. When the song ended, Don leaned closer. "Make a wish," he said. Asterisk. Emma closed her eyes. She didn't wish for toys or trips or even her father's presence. She wished for more moments like this. Moments where she didn't feel like she was on the outside looking in. She opened her eyes, drew in a breath, and blew out the candles. The applause that followed made her laugh. A small, surprise sound that made Layla beam. Asterisk. Don cut the first slice of cake and slid it onto a plate for Emma. Layla immediately reached for the second. They ate together, and with each bite came conversation, favorite movies, dream vacations, silly jokes. Layla confessed she wanted to own a pet giraffe one day. Emma giggled and countered with wanting a dolphin in a giant backyard pool. Don chimed in with how impossible both ideas were, only to get twin mock glares from the girls. Asterisk. Bit by bit, the invisible wall Emma had built around herself began to fade. She found herself leaning in, talking more, even teasing Don about how messy his cake slice looked. The space that had felt so painfully empty just minutes before now rang with laughter and the clink of forks against plates. Asterisk. An hour slipped by without Emma even realizing it. The candles had burned down to tiny wax puddles, the plates were dusted with crumbs, and the restaurant's ambient chatter had softened as people began to leave. Don checked his watch but didn't rush. He could see how much this moment meant, not just to Emma, but to Layla, who seemed to have found a new friend in record time. Finally, Don reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wrapped chocolate in shiny gold foil. He placed it gently in front of Emma. "For the next time you need a smile," he said. Emma picked it up slowly, her fingers brushing over the smooth wrapper as though it were something precious. She looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you for coming over." Layla leaned across the table. "We should hang out again. Next time we can bring cupcakes." Emma's smile widened, a real one, not the polite half-smile she'd worn earlier. She nodded. "I'd like that." Don stood, helping Lila with her coat. As they walked toward the door, Emma watched them, the chocolate still in her hand. She realized that the night hadn't gone as she'd planned. No balloons, no big crowd, no father's presence. But maybe that wasn't what birthdays were really about. Sometimes, the best birthdays weren't about the presents or the perfect plans. They were about the people who chose to show up, even when they didn't have to. People who saw you when no one else did. Emma took one last glance at the empty chair across from her. It didn't look so lonely anymore. And as she wheeled herself toward the exit, she felt lighter, as if the wish she'd made over the cake had already started to come true.